Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's quite possible that many of you think that the thing to do when the band doesn't work in New York is send them up the road to Cornell so Alphonse can give them a bypass. But I think there are many things you can do to help patients with a band to get them to work. Hang on, mate, which one of these is it?
The one thing we can't get to work is the slides. So we'll work on that.
Just push the slides forward.
Maybe you can do them manually in the back.
Hang on. Okay, so I've got just the normal disclosures, Allergan, Ethicon, and Novari, which is the real hand. I think it's important to try to work out how you define success. One of the interesting comments from Jack Himpin's presentation was that even though they reported, quite miserable results, actually the patients were quite happy. And I think it's hard to find a balance sometimes between what a surgeon thinks is a good outcome and what Joe Public thinks is a good outcome, what the actual fat person thinks about, have I actually had a good outcome? Some of these expectations are illogical. Some patients want to melt. I've done a lot of BPDs. BPD patients do melt in the first year. Band patients don't, and it's important to explain this difference to them. Because some of these goals aren't sort of sustainable in the long term. But the real objective is to try and get a happy patient who's lost a decent amount of weight and has really improved their comorbidities. And our job as a surgeon is to help them manage these expectations and sometimes redefine the goals. I think one of the real misconceptions about the band is that you can't eat normal food with a band. We heard that the great downside of the band is you can't enjoy food. Well, I've had a band myself for 10 years, and I could go out with anyone in this room in any restaurant in the world and no one would ever know I had a band because I eat slowly. I still eat, I drink, I misbehave, but it's not like I'm living an abnormal life. I live a normal life doing normal things. I've had a band. And this is the message I try to get across to all our patients. The second thing about the band that it's all about vomiting. It can be that, but it shouldn't be that. And that's part of what I'm going to talk about. And my objective when I look after these people is to change their relationship with food. And I fervently believe that that can only happen if they're not hungry. Fat people are fat, and I know I was, and every patient I've operated on, which is many thousands now, every one of them is starving, hungry, all day, every day. That's why they're fat. Skinny girls are skinny because they don't eat much because they get full and they stop. Fat people like me, we never stop. We just eat, eat, eat. And that doesn't change unless you can help them with surgery. And it's affected by different things. But in the band in particular, it's about eating. And this is what I try to do to get a successful outcome. I'm sure everyone was told this when they were a kid, and none of us have applied it to our life as adults, but everything in moderation. And I'd tell them that you can have ice cream, you can have cookies, you can have chips, you can have pizza. I don't care less what they eat. I'd tell them, if you come and see me and we can adjust this band, you'll be able to eat all those yummy things that you want to eat in moderation, like skinny people do. And that's my absolute goal in caring for lap band patients. I don't have a single rule except if you want it to work, you've got to turn up. And I tell them this at the information session, I tell them this when I see them in follow-up. If you want it to work, turn up, and then I don't really care what you eat. Now this flies in the face of virtually everything that's ever been written about bariatric surgery. But in our band population, which is a lot, as I'll get in a minute. It's about, between the three of us at NYU, we've now done over 10,000 lap bands, and this is how I've looked after them all. I just say, turn up, get your band adjusted, and I don't care what you eat. There are reasons for failure. Some of these things, we certainly have seen leaking ports. I've only ever seen one leaking band itself. Port and tubing things in our practice are about 1%. We've seen a few faulty balloons where the balloon's got like an aneurysmal blowout in the side of the balloon. We've seen one unlocked band. I've been sent 4 failed bands in New York where the band was actually put around the fat pad or the omentum and not actually around the stomach. Eroded bands, we've just published this, I don't know if it's come out yet, about 3,000 bands with 8-year follow-up, and we had 9 erosions at 8 years and 3,000 bands. And the bands certainly do lose fluid over time, and all these things. The reason I got all these lists up there is they're all manifested the same way, which is the patient gets hungry, they can eat more, and they start gaining weight. And you need to keep in the back of your mind that it may not be that the patient's not doing the right thing, inverted commas. It may be that their band's just loose and not working properly, and it's important to check for these things. It's quite disconcerting when you realise the patients, had the band around their omentum. It doesn't tend to work too well. From a physiological point of view, Jacques showed the drawings he did in the bar with Cartier, and I agree with him completely. This is all about accurate band placement with a small pouch above the band, which is in a normal orientation. And I firmly believe that one of the biggest causes of all these problems, particularly now that we've got rid of the whole perigastric band problem and they're past flaccida now, is just undiagnosed hiatal hernias. And as the pressure increases, these things blow out and they get reflux. And also, as they lose a lot of weight, the fat just melts out of the hiatus and there's a big hole. And we've written and talked about this till we're almost blue in the face. But it's really what we've found. And once I worked this out in Australia and came to NYU, and we started doing this, and then we had one of the residents pull out a bunch of data on bands that had been done with a hiatal hernia repair or without a hiatal hernia repair at the time, and that hiatal hernia gave me nothing more than a dimple between the right and left crura. Sometimes it's the whole stomach's in the chest, sometimes it's a hole, sometimes it's a dimple. It doesn't matter what it is, you should repair it. And we looked at the data, comparing those we repaired and those we didn't, and it's basically halved our reoperation rate just by this 10-minute thing of dissecting out the crura in the front of the esophagus and closing that defect. It's either 1 or 2 zero proline figure of 8 sutures, and just that simple maneuver halved our reoperation rate. And it's a fundamental part of the process of doing a good lap band operation now, in our opinion. We still get slips, and I think many of the slips are related to over-tightening in the early part of the process with repeated vomiting. And the difference between a slip and a concentric and a dilatation is that the dilatation is concentric, and there'll often be like a double bubble going up to a hiatal hernia, whereas a slip like the one Jacques showed in his x-ray, the band is pointing down to the left iliac fossa, and there's a huge pouch like he showed, and that's a slip. That's not pouch dilatation with band intolerance. That's a mechanical slip of the lap band. That is reducible and repairable, but that's a personal philosophy about what you want to do with a band when they get this problem. And I think most of these problems can be salvaged by loosening, and if necessary, by repair of hiatal hernias and crural defects. And I haven't got this slide up here, but just to put this in a different way of looking at this, in this series of about 3,000 bands, we've got a couple of papers coming out in surgical endoscopy. We've only ourselves taken out 9 bands out of 3,000. Now, I know the guys up the road have done a few, and I know there's no doubt that there are others that we don't know about, but there's no way it's 900 people or 800 people. It just hasn't happened. And I believe it's because what we've done from the get-go and what I've been preaching about for years was what Jacques Himpens had on his last slide. And that's what I'm going to talk about now. You use a low-pressure band, you put it in properly, and you fix the hiatal hernias, and then you look after them. And that's the key. That's why we've only taken out 9 bands. Now, there's been a few ever so slightly snide comments about why people are doing so many bands and it's all about the money, yada, yada. Well, in New York, all our work's done through insurance, so we're making bugger all money per case, let me tell you. And the reason we do so many is that we look after them and they go out and tell their friends. And the reason bypass is dying on the nose in New York, in the tri-state area, is that people want a safer option. And they never came for the bypass in the first place. These people we're seeing never came, wouldn't even think about it. They want this safer option, so our job is to look after them, and I want them to tell their friends, so we do more of them. And it's just been our philosophy. And this is, to me, the key is to look after these people. And we believe you should see them once a month for the first year, and then slow it down after that. But as Jacques said, you cannot expect to get a good outcome with a band seeing people 3 or 4 times a year. It's just a profound waste of time. And even crueler than that, it's giving them false hope. They think that, let me tell you, no one who's obese wants to be fat. They want to be thin. They come and see a surgeon who says, here you go, I'm going to give you a band. Oh, by the way, I'll see you in 4 months. You may as well fan them with a wet kipper. It just doesn't work. And it never will work. And it's illogical to say the band doesn't work when you're not actually looking after them. It's just not right. All those patients should have a bypass or a sleeve. It's crazy. So we believe, we're doing about 800 bands a year. We also do bypasses regularly and sleeves and DSs. We do all of them, but the vast majority of what we do. And to make that work, we have to work really hard because there's just thousands. We have thousands of these people. And so now as a group, we do about 1,000 adjustments a month. We do the majority of them at NYU, but we go twice a month to 4 different peripheral centers so that the people can get their bands adjusted. And guess what? Because we provide the care, they come in droves. And then they tell their friends, and they come in droves. And that's why we're doing so many bands. We're not doing bands to make money. We're doing bands to make New York thin and healthy. And that's really our objective. And it's sort of working. I have a very different philosophy. I tell them, it's your band, buddy. I've got mine. This is yours. And all I ask is that you turn up. I say the same thing to the teenagers. I say the same thing to the grandparents. I say the whole thing. But if you want it to work, you've got to come. And it's a real two-way street. And my belief, which is shared, I know, with John Dixon and Paul O'Brien, is that the band works by controlling hunger. Dixon's paper is phenomenal at explaining this. And it was he that came up with the green zone, not Allergan. And Dixon said, if you adjust the band right, they'll be fine. If it's loose, they'll be hungry. No fat person is going to lose weight if they're still hungry, unless they have a DS. And one of the questions I was going to ask about the DS is, how do you control the foul-smelling farts? Because that's the problem the patients have with a DS. And it's the same sort of thing with this. Our job is to control hunger with a band. It's not a punitive blocking mechanism. It's about controlling hunger and getting a balance between hunger, getting full, but not vomiting too much. That's what this is about. You really need to, if you want to be serious about caring for band patients, you have to somehow grip this idea that you've got to see them and you've got to help them control hunger. And if you do that, these patients do well. And it really is a two-way street. And one of the things I say to every patient in my office is, if you don't think it's going to be easy for you to come back, you shouldn't have a band, because it's false hope. It won't work, mate. I tell them all, it won't work if you don't come back. And so they're the people we give bypasses or sleeves or BPDs to, the people that won't or can't come back to follow up. So the thing that I've learned is that all problems with a band are caused by patients eating too fast. And it's just that simple. It takes about 25 seconds for food to go down your esophagus, into the pouch, and through the band. And the average fat person eats every 3 seconds. It's boom, chew, 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 yummy. Boom, chew, 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 yummy. Boom, chew, chew, chew. And then they're finished, and then they do it again. Well, if you eat like that, you're going to get 8 or 10 boluses of food up your esophagus. And it's going to stretch the esophagus, and you're going to get a pain like a heart attack. And it's horrible. And it's no wonder that they can't tolerate it. I don't think it matters what food you're eating. All that matters is how fast. If you gulp with a band a glass of water, you get the same pain because of sudden distension of your distal esophagus. So what we do is we tell them you have to eat every 25 to 30 seconds. And so you have to eat every 25 to 30 seconds. And I tell them to get a clock with a second hand and learn what 25 to 30 seconds is. And when they come back, I ask them, how you doing? You're hungry, etc., etc., etc. And then I actually in my office with a clock, and I say, okay, you just had a bite. You tell me when you had your next bite. And they'll go invariably 10 or 11 seconds. And they say, see, Doc, I'm eating slowly. And I say, yeah, but I told you 25 to 30 seconds, and you're eating every 8 to 10 seconds. The food won't go down. They get the pain, they vomit. And so my perspective on the band is that a lot of these issues with band management can be helped by getting patients to eat slowly. And then finally, what do I think to do if the band doesn't work? Obviously, these are all options. I've personally taken out 4 bands and converted them to sleeves, and they just didn't work. They just simply didn't lose weight. The BPD is my preference. The best paper about this that has been written was written by Cartier, I think, and he showed he could do it safely, but he found the same thing. They really just didn't lose that much weight with a sleeve after a band. And so I don't think it's the best option. So my option is the BPD. So thanks very much.